From the fridge, going to grab myself some sour cream. Yogurt you can use too, but today I got in the mood to make some naan bread. So really simple, 7 ingredients. Dry ingredients first, 2 cups of flour, 1 tablespoon of white sugar, 2 teaspoons of salt, 1 teaspoon of instant dry yeast. Mix it all together. The reason why I use instant dry yeast for this is because with active dry, you have to activate the yeast first with sugar and water. But with instant dry yeast, you can just measure it out, throw it right in the dry ingredients, and it will activate when you add the wet stuff to it. So just give that a little bit of a mix up. Get rid of your stuff. For the wet ingredients, so the other 3 ingredients are about 2 tablespoons of yogurt or sour cream, 3 tablespoons of olive oil, and 375 mils of water. Really interesting thing about this olive oil, you want to use a good extra virgin olive oil, but the olive oil that I'm using is actually called Salah's Gold, and we got it from a friend of ours, a philanthropist named Salah Bashir in Toronto. He has a olive plantation in Lebanon, so really cool that we get to use something like that from someone that we know that made it. Again, just any good extra virgin olive oil will work. Add that 375 ml of water into the yogurt or sour cream olive oil mixture. Give it a little mix up. You don't have to worry about getting it really blended, and then just add it to all of your dry ingredients. Just mix it up. Get the stuff clean, throw it away. I'm grabbing a fork. If you've already used the whisk or whatever, it's probably easy too, but I like a fork for this. You'll see a lot of people use fork. It just seems to come together really quickly and good for scraping down the sides. Stuff doesn't really get stuck in. Unlike a scone dough or something like that, when you're making a leavened naan bread, you don't have to worry too much about overworking the gluten or butter staying cold, anything like that. You can see just how simple it is. You just kind of push it all together. Once you start seeing it become cohesive, just roll it out onto the counter into a big ball. There's going to be a lot of dry flour still at the bottom of the bowl. Don't worry about it. You're going to incorporate it all. It's not really a sticky dough. If you've ever made pizza dough, I'll do a video on that later. But if you've ever made a pizza dough before, it's pretty sticky. It's hard to work with on the counter. This is actually pretty soft already off the bat. It's not short. It's not crummy. It's actually a really warm, easy dough to work with. So just get everything that you left on the counter, all those good bits. Again, this is, when you're making naan, it's a dough that comes from South Asia. You see it a lot in Indian cooking. You see it a lot in Caribbean cooking. You can use it in traditionally it's made in a tandoor, but you can do it on a pizza stone in a hot oven. You can do it on a cast iron, which I'm going to do today. You can do it inside a outdoor pizza oven. I have a really cool rock box. You can do it on the grill. Really easy dough. It's pretty, foolproof. It's not that finicky, so you can bake it whichever way you want. You just want to make sure that you cook it at a super high temp. So once the dough is kind of again come together, just make sure that you're working it. You don't want too much of that dry flour that's in the bottom to be left on top, because that's what kind of creates that powdery texture. So you can use cooking spray here. Now you just want to kind of get the dough to get into a bowl to get it ready for that 1.5 hour rise. So I just put a little bit of olive oil in that bowl, and really that's just so that when the dough's proofing or rising, it doesn't stick to the side of the bowl. Again, just give it a little, with all doughs, just give it a little tappy poos, a little spank, and yeah, pretty good. So at this point, you want to cover it. You can put it with either saran wrap or a wet cloth. Just cover it. The thing is that you don't want any air getting into it. Otherwise, the top of the dough will get really dry. Once it's covered, I like to warm my oven up and turn the oven off once it gets to warm. There should be a warm setting on your oven, but that just allows the dough to rise at a proper temperature, especially if it's cold. After about an hour, hour and a half, you'll probably see it doubles in size. And then when you grab it out, you'll see that the yeast has been already activated and there's a lot of air bubbles in it. Just push it down. It's called knocking the dough. You'll hear that term a lot, but knock the dough down. You want to get as much flour onto the board as you possibly can. Again, it's going to accept a lot. Don't worry too much about, adding a lot, adding too little. You'll kind of be able to tell by how it's being worked out on the board whether or not it's sticking or not. If it sticks to the bottom of the board, or in this case my counter, then I'm just going to add more flour. So this little technique here, it takes a little bit to get used to doing that. You do it a lot with pizza dough. You see a lot of pizzaiolos do it, but really it's just kind of slapping the dough back and forth to stretch it and get it bigger. Again, you can see just how much flour I'm adding to it right now. The thing is that when you're making naan, you want to get it to about 1/8 of an inch in thickness. I'm rolling out all of the edges, all those air pockets that were created in the proofing process. When you get those in the oven, they'll kind of puff up quite a bit. You can leave them if you want. It's just going to create an airier, kind of bigger pockets of dough and air, so it's going to blister a lot more. But me, I like to roll mine out all the way up to the edges because I want something thin that when it kind of stays a little bit, not dense, but a little bit more chewy in the center. So check the bottom, check the top. Clearly it's not sticking. You can flip it over once more, give it a little bit more flour on that side. And then when it's all floured up and ready to go, you just got to start thinking about kind of how you're portioning it. So with me, I'm going to use a cast iron today. I know the size of my cast iron. It's a 10-inch cast iron. So that's measured from the base of the cast iron. I'm going to cut mine in probably 6 maybe. So one cut at the bottom, one cut at the top, and probably one cut through the middle. And that'll be my 6 pieces. Again, when you're looking at naan, it's always got that cool kind of oval shape to it. Don't worry too much because you're going to reshape it and rework it. And if you look, when you scrunch it together, it doesn't really stick. So you've done the right thing. So you can reshape it. At this point, I want to get my cast iron out again. I've got a 10-inch base one. It's 12-inch at the top, 10-inch at the bottom. But you want to get that cranking hot. I wouldn't even start thinking about cooking your dough for about 10 minutes. You want to kind of see that pan is smoking. And again, don't add any oil, don't add any butter or anything like that to the pan. You want to cook these naan dry. Ugh, I hate butter paper. So with naan, the best way to make it is with garlic butter. And you don't need any fancy tools. You don't need to melt it in a pot or anything like that. Just take a chunk of butter, whatever you think is going to be. I'm making 6 pieces. Use a microplane. This one here I have is microplane brand. Some people call it a rasp. Great for grating garlic, ginger, stuff like that. I'm going to grate a little bit of raw garlic in there. And heat up your butter in the microwave. 1-2 cloves in there, mix it with it. Clearly I'm a little bit of a jungly, but add it all together and that's ready to go. All you need is a pastry brush. You could use herbs to brush it on. You see that a lot on Jamie Oliver shows, but I'm going to use a pastry brush. So it's been going for about 10 minutes now, and you just want to reshape the dough, and then it's pretty much ready to go. And just make sure all the excess flour is taken off. At this point, you know that your dough is not ready to go if after 4 or 5 minutes of being in the pan, if it looks more like pizza crust on the bottom. So if it's got a lot of goldenness to it, then your pan wasn't hot enough. But as you can see there, I've got a lot of black charring, blistering. Those pockets are perfect because that's air bubbles kind of forming, and then they break in the pan as it's charring. Again, you can see how dry the pan is. Stuff is kind of sticking to it. But again, really good. Those pockets are what's going to accept that garlic butter. So just check the bottom. You don't want to cook both sides the same way. You want that top to be nice and crispy and the bottom to still be really airy and fluffy. But at the end, when it's warm, just brush it with a little bit of that garlic butter and top it with a little bit of salt. I don't like to use salted butter. Unsalted butter is way better. You can control the amount of salt. I'm using fleur de sel to garnish it. And lastly, you see a lot of people use parsley. I'm going to be using cilantro because of the dish that I'm making. You could use chive. You could use all kinds of things. But with naan, I like cilantro. That's it. Easy.